If you're in the mental health industry and want to grow your impact, your reach, and your organization, you need to be at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. This October 7th through 9th, join hundreds of marketers, executives, and clinicians for 3 powerful days of inspiration, strategy, and networking. From AI to storytelling, from branding to market strategy, you'll leave with actionable ideas, meaningful connections, and access to industry experts. It's so much more than a conference. It's a community. Visit mhmarketing.org to learn more and grab your ticket today. Attend in person in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, or attend online and see me as one of the keynotes. And use discount Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. Again, that's mhmarketing.org and use promo code Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1244. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. We want both sides of that. We want the thriving side and we want the love side. There's lots of ways to make money, but we want you to do it in a way that it means something to you, that you enjoy it, that you love it. So I'm really excited because today's guest, we just talked about before we got rolling, all the different directions we could go. Sometimes it's hard to narrow it down when you have someone that's as talented as our guest today to figure out kind of our main focus. And, we decided we'll focus a little bit kind of mostly on the brain, but we might go in and out of some of that too. So we're going to be talking about ketamine clinics. We're going to be talking about investment funds in brain health and human neurotech and AI and brain-computer interfaces, all sorts of stuff we're going to be talking about. I have Dustin Robinson with me, who is a licensed attorney, CPA, and realtor. He's the founder of Lumalex Law, one of the top law firms serving mental health clinics and practitioners, and Eater Investments, a venture capital fund investing in alternative therapies for mental health. He's also the co-founder of SciRise, a marketing platform for mental health practitioners. Dustin, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, you do so many different things. Were you just into a lot of stuff and you decided to do it all at once, or has it kind of built over time where you kind of went into one vertical and then jumped to another one? Because, there's just so many different areas that you're involved in.
Yeah, it definitely built over time. I didn't set out to have as many different things going on as I do, but it really, the heart of it all is my law firm. My law firm has been working with a lot of different doctors, physicians, and practitioners for a very long time. And it was really about 5 or 6 years ago, some of those doctors started reaching out about getting involved more on the psychedelic side. And that kind of led me further along into focusing on mental and behavioral health. So I really started off just working with a lot of doctors through my law firm, that were trying to do different stuff. Some of them were setting up research programs with universities. And as I dug deeper, I started realizing that there's some interesting alternative therapies for mental health, and started licensing some of the IP from some of the universities like NYU, Yale, Imperial College. And we launched our investment fund, Eater Investments. And so Eater Investments is really focused on alternative therapies for mental and behavioral health. At least that's what our current fund is focused on. We're broadening that out in our next fund that we'll be launching in the second quarter of 2025, which is going to be more so on human optimization, which obviously has a mental health component. But along my journey learning about the brain, I realized that the brain really, it controls nearly everything. So many different conditions and indications are all controlled by the brain. And so I realized our initial thesis specifically around mental health was in some ways a little bit too narrow. So we started looking at, medicines for neurodegenerative diseases and various other conditions, and realized, the brain controls just so much. So right now, my main focus, I have my law firm. We work with a lot of clinics and practitioners. And then I have my investment fund where our key focus is really around brain health, as well as human optimization.
Mm. Now, I want to dig into mostly the brain stuff, but um, I know being an attorney and a CPA and all your background, it probably seems easy to start an investment fund. Like, what goes into starting an investment fund? And I'm sure that could be its own like 3-part podcast that we would dig into. And obviously, someone's not going to be able to launch one after just hearing a quick answer. But like, what all goes into starting an investment fund?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd always I had been in an angel investor myself, so I have invested in early stage companies for probably the past 7 to 8 years, and then we started doing some like SPVs, which are just like direct investments into companies, raising capital into a special purpose vehicle. And as things progressed and we saw the opportunity here, we realized that this was really, in my opinion, one of the largest problems society is facing is really the mental health crisis and really understanding the brain. So that's when we decided to do it in a much broader scope and launch our fund. Obviously, there's a lot of legal documentation required to launch a fund. So obviously, as an attorney, I felt comfortable with that. But really, what took a lot of our time before we launched was actually building the team. I have a partner at my investment fund. He's a Harvard MBA graduate. Obviously, I'm a lawyer and a CPA, but a lot of what we're investing in is technologies, science, medicine, areas that, quite frankly, I am not an expert in. So we spent a great deal of time building our venture partner team to help us properly diligence these deals, as well as help us assist our portfolio companies. So I would say, you got to get the legal aspects put together, but also, whatever your theme is, whatever you're investing into, you got to make sure you have the proper subject matter experts around you. We've got researchers on our team. We've got doctors. We've got scientists. We've got a whole slew of different kind of subject matter experts on our team. And I think that was our big differentiator when we originally launched our fund. And then once you have that, it's raising the capital. Once you raise the capital, that I would say is one of the harder parts, or at least one of the biggest barriers to entry. And you raise the capital, then you start deploying into deals. And, we take board seats on several of our companies. So after you deploy the capital, you got to make sure you're helping manage those portfolio companies and make sure that you're, creating as much value as possible. And then ultimately at the end, you're trying to exit and return capital to your investors. So that's kind of the short version of the full scope of running a fund.
Man. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like really interesting, exciting things that are, at the cutting edge of like human potential and really pushing into how do we use these new tools or, ancient tools in the view of psychedelics to help humans live differently. I want to start with ketamine because that sounds like that was some of the entry point for you in regards to working with practitioners around ketamine. Um, what are you seeing? And we can talk the legal, but we can also talk the impact side. Like, what are you seeing around the field of psychedelics with ketamine and other things that are happening in regards to just changes in the brain and what we're seeing in kind of the business world around ketamine and psychedelics?
Absolutely, yeah. So our investment fund was very focused on the drug development side because most of these psychedelic compounds are Schedule One, so they need to be developed through the FDA, get drug approval, and ultimately rescheduled so that they could be commercially distributed through doctors through prescriptions. But ketamine was the oddball out, where it was actually already FDA approved as an anesthetic. And people started realizing through various research, most of it at universities, that the ketamine actually helps a lot with various mental and behavioral health conditions. So a lot of doctors began using ketamine off label. And off label, I'm sure your listeners probably are familiar with the term off label, but for those that aren't, it just means that a compound is being used for a condition it wasn't approved for. There's nothing wrong with it as long as there's research behind it. Doctors do it all the time. I think, something like 20% of all prescriptions are being used off label. And so ketamine is an off label use when it's being used for mental health and behavioral health. Generic ketamine is when you're doing it off label, generally insurance is not going to cover it. And that's one of the bigger challenges for ketamine clinics is if they're just using the typical generic ketamine, it's generally not going to be covered by insurance, although there's a couple different ways to get some of the different aspects covered by insurance. So it's really cash pay. And that's been probably one of the bigger challenges for the ketamine clinics, is not only being able to target the people who are have these indications like depression and PTSD. So number one, that needs to be the case. Number two, the people need to be able to afford this type of therapy. And number three, they have to be comfortable with entering into a dissociative state like ketamine does. So it's been challenging for some companies to, kind of generate enough revenue, enough butts, and I say butts and seats. That's the key. And then, then there was a huge uptick in ketamine telehealth companies. Once the COVID happened, there's a federal statute called the Ryan-Haight Act, which doesn't allow controlled substances to be prescribed without an in-person visit. There was a waiver for during COVID for that. And so that kind of was a catalyst for a lot of companies being launched in the ketamine telehealth space. So basically sending out lozenges to people's homes, and doing an online visit through video conference, writing the prescription and delivering them the lozenge, and kind of monitoring them at home remotely. So that was a big industry. I helped launch some of the first couple companies that launched in that industry. That COVID waiver is still around, although the DEA is consistently looking to potentially end it. It's been set to expire about 3 times, and it just keeps getting extended. So I think if people are interested in getting into ketamine, I think they need to ask themselves, number one, do they want to do it through telehealth? Number two, or do they want to do it in a physical location? And number two, there's a lot of different routes of administration, whether it be through IV, IM, or lozenge form. And I've heard different doctors give different opinions about which is better. I don't have any opinion myself. I leave that to the doctors to decide. And then there's also Spravato, which is actually the first psychedelic that's been FDA approved for a mental health condition. So Spravato is also known as esketamine, and it recently demonstrated that it's a blockbuster drug with over $1 billion in revenue. So for Spravato, that actually is covered by insurance, because if you have treatment-resistant depression, which is what it's approved for. So a lot of the ketamine clinics that were having trouble finding the cash pay patients are now kind of pivoting into providing Spravato. So Spravato has been very exciting. There's a very specific REM required for Spravato, risk evaluation mitigation strategy, that needs to be followed. You also need to have your clinic certified through Janssen, and Janssen is essentially the owner of Spravato. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of hoops you got to jump through to be able to provide Spravato, but it seems to be a very big opportunity that a lot of clinics are moving towards. And also I would just add that a lot of clinics are kind of realizing that just offering ketamine or just offering Spravato probably isn't the right approach. Like you mentioned, you use the word tool, that's just one tool, but generally you want to have multiple tools for your for your patients to come in. So we've seen a lot of people adding TMS and different neuromodulation projects, various neurotech products as well. So we're seeing more of the ketamine clinics starting to expand out into various other areas.
Mm. And what kind of results are we seeing with ketamine with the research that's happening in clinics that are incorporating it?
Well, the research has been very promising. My investment fund, we invest in a company, Awaken, that has a phase 3 trial going at University of Exeter for ketamine for alcohol use disorder. And the results they've gotten from their phase 2 trials was absolutely tremendous. And obviously, we're hoping that their phase 3 trials demonstrate equal of efficacy. So, on the mental health side, I think, a lot of people they think of ketamine maybe for depression or PTSD, but we're also seeing tremendous potential around various addiction indications, substance use disorders. That same company, Awaken, is even doing some research around gambling addiction. porn addiction, things like that. So all these various behavioral addictions, ketamine is also showing tremendous results for.
Hmm. Listen, I didn't take insurance in my counseling practice because I had no idea how to handle it. The process of accepting insurance outside of a group practice can be tough, but most people looking for mental health care want to use their benefits to pay for sessions. If you're like me and you feel a little scared about taking insurance, or you just want to make it easier on yourself, and you're interested in seeing clients through insurance, Alma can help. They make it easy to get credentialed with major insurance plans at enhanced reimbursement rates. They also handle all the paperwork, from eligibility checks to claim submission and guaranteed payment within 2 weeks. Plus, when you join Alma, you'll get access to time-saving tools for intake, scheduling, treatment plans, progress notes, and more in their included platform. It's going to make it so much easier for your team, so you can spend less time on administrative work and more time offering great care to your clients. Visit helloalma.com/Joe. That's helloalma.com/Joe to get started. Well, tell me some of the things around the kind of human neurotech and brain-computer interface work. I mean, that just sounds like out of a sci-fi book. Like, what are you guys looking at there?
Yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on, and really so much of what we invest in has kind of been kind of catapulted through the advent of AI, or at least AI progressing at such a fast pace as it is. And really, BCI is implanting some sort of device inside your brain or even on the outside of your brain. And the big difference here is that, historically or traditionally, we've thought of the brain being these conditions being solved through chemistry or biology, delivering a medicine to the brain. But as we understand that the brain, it's all energy, right? There's energy. And so what a lot of these like neuromodulation tools do are actually sending energy to the brain, right? Not necessarily using chemistry, using energy. And so when you and the big key right now for a lot of these BCI, so BCI in general is putting some sort of device in or around the brain, tracking what's going on in the brain. That chip or that device is connected to a remote computer, and you're able to pick up in real time the brain waves that are going on and adjust those brain waves through that device. And so the key right now, for a lot of companies, you have companies like Neuralink where it's very invasive. They're putting it into the cortex. But you have other companies now that are developing devices that are placed in the skull. And now we're seeing even less invasiveness, actually putting it like by the backside, outside of your neck. So there's various different ways to do it. But what's exciting about this is that you're able to monitor in real time what's going on in the brain. And I think this is really getting into kind of more personalized medicine. As we know, SSRIs, while they get approved for depression or whatever it is, different people respond better to different SSRIs, right? And we're really trying to move more towards a personalized approach. And when you're able to actually pick up brain waves through medical devices and understand what's going on in this individual's brain at this particular moment, and then adjust the therapy that is going into the brain, I think you're going to start to see much stronger outcomes, and the potential is just enormous. Obviously, through this technology, our hope is that we'll really learn a lot more about the brain, because that's the biggest challenge, is that with SSRIs or with psychedelic medicines, whatever it might be, there's a lot of guesswork going on because we know so little about the brain as far as the mechanism of action and what is really happening and why we're seeing therapeutic effects. And my hope is through some of the stuff going on the neurotech side, and even on the imaging side as well, there's been a lot of breakthroughs happening as well. I think we're going to learn a lot more about the brain, why people have depression, the different forms of depression, what parts of the brain we need to activate to address these issues. So really, we're just starting to scratch the surface. But I think with AI, the speed at which it's progressing, I think we're going to really start taking some enormous strides over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of ethical or physical concerns are there? I mean, I'm just thinking about me. Like I'm type 1 diabetic and I have an insulin pump, and it took me years to even feel like I wanted to have that technology attached to my body, because it felt like I was slowly becoming Darth Vader, just like more and more tech on my body, even though my body needed an insulin pump. Like, how are you thinking through, for potential customers or investors, like that kind of worry of putting technology actually like into our body to change things?
Yeah, I mean, that's why invasiveness is a key issue here. I think, obviously the more invasive it is, so for Neuralink, for example, being in the cortex, they're able to pick up much more defined signals than if you have a device in the skull, and the skull is able to pick up much better than if have some sort of device that's not actually inside of your head. So the more invasive it is, generally the more accurate the technology is, but the more risks that are involved. Um, and so obviously all these companies are going through clinical trials, right? These aren't commercialized or available yet, as far as these BCI devices. So through these clinical trials, we're going to figure out kind of any safety or risk issues, and hopefully those will be able to be addressed. But I think a lot of people ask me, like, you invest across a wide range of mental health stuff, like, if one of these works, then isn't it going to supplant all these other investments you have? And the reality is everyone's going to have their own preference. Some people are going to be very open to trying psychedelics. Some people are not. Some people will be happy to have a chip implanted deep into their brain, into their cortex, especially if there's someone with a very, very bad disability, if they're paraplegic or have some sort of other condition that really needs serious attention. And then other people are not going to be as comfortable with having something implanted deep into their brain. Maybe they're more comfortable with the skull. So I think the key is to have multiple options for multiple patients, and whatever a patient is comfortable with is what we're going to do. And I think it's also for people to understand that we have a very, very rigorous FDA clinical trial pathway that these therapies need to go to ensure safety and effectiveness. And I think in many ways, these devices are actually going to prove to be far safer than what we have with some of these SSRIs that have been on the market for 3 decades or more. Some of the SSRIs have horrible side effects because they're not as targeted. They're just they're hitting various aspects and unintended targets, and often that leads to suicidal ideation, weight gain, all sorts of different issues. A lot of people, sometimes I'm not here to say that SSRIs are bad for everyone, but I think it goes back to my comment that we really need to have a more personalized approach to medicine. What works for one person isn't going to work for another person. And I think some of this the neuromodulation, the BCI, some of the stuff being developed in neurotech is going to be just one additional tool. And I think in many respects, I think they will be able to show that these are actually safer than a lot of the pharmaceuticals we're currently using traditionally.
Dustin, what do you personally like use in regards to just your own brain health? Like, how are you thinking through this, and how? Because like I think when you're obviously watching clinical trials, you're not like put that on me, but like there's got to be, if you're interested in this sort of thing, that you're in some way thinking about brain health for yourself. What are you thinking through when it comes to brain health personally?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've learned through my own journey is, just although we invest in all these different things, the best things you can do for your health is get good sleep, have a good diet, have good physical activity, and have some sort of mindfulness practice. Those are kind of my 4 ingredients to living a happy and healthy lifestyle. Really, nothing can replace that. If you're getting good sleep, you're getting good physical fitness, good physical activity, you're eating right, and you have some mindfulness practice, whether it's meditation, breath work, taking a walk in nature, whatever it might be, you're generally going to be able to manage a lot of the stuff, or at least even better, probably, than some of these SSRIs and other medications. Unfortunately, a lot of people can't do all four of those things. It sounds much easier than it is. And so these different tools are sometimes helpful. But me personally, I've tried a whole lot of different stuff. But one of the tools I use on a regular basis, we invested in a company called Muse, and it is a
Oh yeah, they were a
EEG.
sponsor for years.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, it's an EEG headband. We were early investors in them. It's an EEG headband that gives you real-time biofeedback when you're meditating. So you're able to kind of tell when your mind is wandering off and bring it back into focus. And recently they've actually expanded into the sleep market as well. So being able to kind of read your brain waves and help you fall asleep and have a deeper sleep. So Muse is a great one. And I also, I'm pretty active on breath work as well. I think breath work is important. I'm actually not great on the meditation side. A lot of people I know are great meditators. For me, I work out every single day for about an hour and a half. To me, that's kind of my meditation. And I think the lesson from that is I think everyone's got to figure out what works best for them. For me, sitting still in a meditative state for 10 minutes, I'm just not good at it. And I just can't do it. I don't have the patience for it. But when I'm working out, I'm really in my flow state. I blast my music. There's no external world around me. It's my time, my hour and a half in the day where nothing external matters. It's my time for myself. And I think it's just important for people to find that for themselves. We're looking for innovative tools to help people, but in the end, it's really up to each individual to take control of their own health. And once again, focus on those four things: sleep, physical activity, nutrition, mindfulness practice. And if you can find tools that could assist you in all four of those, I think that's where your focus should be.
So awesome. The final question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
My dad was a doctor, and one of the things, he was a great, great, great surgeon. He wasn't the best businessman. And I think that kind of taught me a lesson. And, even in law, I love practicing law. But at the end of the day, for practitioners, it's important you don't just rest on your scientific or technical expertise that you have. You have to really understand people and business, how to communicate. And I think that's one thing that has served me very, very well. I've spent a lot of time and energy on my education, but at the end of the day, those degrees I have really don't mean much compared to my ability to communicate with people and my ability to conduct business. So my advice for some of these practitioners out there is, yes, you've gone through probably rigorous training in your particular area of expertise, but don't think that that's enough for you to be successful in this world. And I'm not just talking about financially, just, even in just building relationships and your own mental health. I think it's very important that you understand that, your degree or your license shouldn't be a limiting factor. It should be an expanding factor, right? I hear so many lawyers say to me, I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to practice law. I can't go out and do business. It's like, no, that's looking at your law degree as a limiting factor. Your law degree has allowed you to think a certain way and understand law a certain way. So you go out and do any number of things and apply that knowledge. And I would just tell practitioners the same thing. Don't think that your license or your degree is a limiting factor. It's very much expanding your knowledge that you've learned, allows you to do so many different things in so many different areas.
Wow, so awesome. If people want to connect with your law firm, if they want to connect with you, follow your work, where should we send them?
They could. My email address for my law firm is info@lumalexlaw.com. That's info@lumalexlaw.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Dustin Robinson. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at DustinR10. Those are probably the best ways to get in touch.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes as well. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love that Dustin's so involved in all these things that have to do with the brain. And those core things that we know of sleeping and eating well and moving our bodies and meditation and, being around people we enjoy, they're never going to go away. I mean, I remember when I first started as a therapist, and I was mostly working with angry teens that were in like residential facilities. And we would start with, how much caffeine are you taking in? How much, kind of sugar type things are you taking in? Do you even, read the labels to know how much sugar you're taking in? And these families often, when we would add just like an hour of sleep, or like, let's cut off the sugar, by like 3 o'clock, or, eat a little healthier dinner, how it took that lens of behavior problems off. And oftentimes these were chronically underslept kids that were getting a ton of sugar in their lives. And then they had, on top of that, a lot of trauma sometimes. That those really small changes had huge impacts. And there's also this really cool technology that's coming out, where we didn't really even dig into AI as much as we probably could have. But looking at all these different technologies to be able to dive in. So, as you're joining us, would love for you to just continue to grow and to change and to become your best practitioner. If you want to reach out to us over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership to join one of our memberships, we would love that. Thank you so much to Alma for being our sponsor today. I wish Alma had been around when I had my private practice. I had no idea what I was doing. That's why I didn't take insurance. But if Alma had been there, I would have. And there's no reason that as a clinician, you should be spending hours on paperwork to bill for insurance, or not knowing for sure that you'll get reimbursed for sessions with your clients. If you're interested in seeing clients through insurance but don't want to navigate the process and paperwork on your own, Alma can help. They make it easy to get credentialed with major insurance plans at enhanced reimbursement rates and a guaranteed payment within 2 weeks. Visit helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to get started. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.